Here we are again, finding ourselves embracing the light. This is not the time for your light to grow dim, not a time for you to be hiding your light under a bushel and being introverted and keeping things to yourself. This is a time for you to be shining and growing brighter every moment of the day, becoming illuminated and intoxicated with the wisdom of God. Today we're in Psalm 84. What a mighty psalm Psalm 84 is. I'm just excited to be able to get into a little bit of it with you. So without any further ado, let me read from verses 1 to 2. How lovely are your dwelling places, O Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. The title of this psalm in the Septuagint reads, For the Wine Vats. It's an intoxicating psalm. So my soul, my heart, that's your spirit, and my flesh, the tripartite nature of man. The knowledge of human nature has been given to the church. Philosophers and psychologists, doctors have explored to a certain degree the needs and motives and drives of the individual, but it's to the church that has been given the keys to the soul. Did you know that your soul can yearn? Did you know that your soul can faint? Did you know your spirit, that's the deepest part of you, your essential you-ness, cries out for the living God? Even your flesh, that part of you that is connected to the world and can become so self-absorbed, realizes its need when your flesh gets moments of sanity. It realizes its desperate need for the presence of God. So all of me, all of you, every part of you, whether you realize it or not, every part of you needs God's presence and desperately desires the presence of God and desperately desires that presence of God in your innermost parts, deep, deep down on the inside. If we don't find him there, we won't find him anywhere. But if we do find him there, we know that we will never lose him again. And wherever we turn, we shall see his face. Spiritual life only has meaning when we relate it to what takes place on the inside of us. The dwelling places of God number 10,000 times 10,000, for his word tells us that you are the temple of God. Above all, God's reality is experienced from within. What does it avail me to know that God exists if he does not exist in me? That I should find Christ in me, that's what really matters. That's the hope of glory. When Christ enters your life and makes your soul virtuous, that's truly what you're looking for. Further, when God manifests his presence, we suddenly find ourselves in the courts of the Lord. This is why it says, judgment begins in the house of God. God's presence and God's judgment go hand in hand. Don't be afraid now. The fact that God is present is proof that we have his favor. So any fear that we might experience brings us into the wisdom, the place of wisdom, so that we understand that God is present. Do not think of the courts of the Lord as something exterior to us, some judgment setting waiting for us in heaven. Of course, there is going to be a judgment at the end of all time, but right now God is judge. He is the judge over all the earth right now. And the fact that he lives in you and that you have the presence of God in you means that when we come together as a church or come together as family, it means that God is present there and he's the judge, just as much the judge there as he will be at the end of time. There's no change with God in these matters. His character and his nature remain the same throughout it all. And so when we come with God's presence in us, it means we come with the judge presiding. That's why Paul says the saints will judge all things, because we come bearing the presence of God. Can you see now why it's so unreasonable for Christians to take one another to court? I've had Christians threaten to take me to court. I've had pastors threaten to take me to court over ridiculous things. It made me laugh when they threatened that. Why would Christians ever think of taking one another to court? We have God as our judge. Leave it to him to say who's right and who's wrong. Better is one day in your courts, verse 10 says, of Psalm 84, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. Better to be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than dwell in the tents or the palaces of the wicked. Here we have a king writing the psalm, envying a doorkeeper. That's how powerfully becoming one with God affects the world around you. That the humblest person with the humblest job becomes someone to be admired by kings. That's a phenomenon. Pride comes before a fall, but humility precedes promotion. Do you see that there's an equation going on here? One day versus 1,000. So much time is spent elsewhere. People spend years getting educated, years in front of the television, plenty of time down the beach, time at sporting games and watching their favorite teams play, and time spent on the psychiatrist's couch. None of these things are essentially bad, but in relation to the real needs of your soul, they provide minimal return. It would take more than 1,000 days elsewhere for you to receive the benefits of one day in the presence of God. Don't be a stranger to your soul. Give your soul what it requires. Every moment I spend with God gives exponential return. One moment in worship, one moment in quiet contemplation, or in prayer, or waiting upon the Lord, or sitting at the feet of Jesus, or fellowshipping with his saints can sustain me for 1,000 moments. Just give me a moment. Give me a day, and I'll be sustained for 1,000. That's nearly 3 years' value out of one day in the presence of God. That's how long some of you have been at university. You come out with your graduation or your PhD and letters behind your name. But God says it's better to spend one day with him than do all of that. Come on now, wise up. Spend your time where it belongs, and you'll gain exponential return and all of the life and power and love and answers that you need in the presence of Jesus. God bless you. We'll speak to you again tomorrow.